We would like to begin panel discussion. The moderator and panelists, please come forward to the stage. Please welcome them with applause. The theme is the promotion of transition finance in Japan. This point onward, I would like to ask Ms. Shirai to serve as the moderator. Over to you, Ms. Shirai.
Good afternoon. Shirai of Keio University. Nice to be here. Transition finance. Japan has been quite early in using this expression. Recently, it's spread and become more known around the world. Last year, OECD came up with a transition finance report. What is transition finance? GHG emission is large in various countries. At the moment, at reasonable cost, there isn't any means to decarbonize at reasonable cost. But in order to secure social development and economic growth for the future, this is a must-do for the society, and corporates need to reduce emissions. And financing those initiatives by companies is what we call transition finance. And I think this concept has become better rooted around the world. In Asia, there's higher dependency on fossil fuel, and the manufacturing sector is huge in many countries. So in Asia, there is heightened attention for transition finance. I was in Manila until yesterday, and in Asian financial regulators, there are candid conversations ongoing. Can Asia attract investors with reliable transition strategy? The authorities also want to engage in dialogue. We are limited in terms of time, but we have representatives of various sectors. We don't have much time, so I'm going to skip the introduction of the panelists. And I want to ask questions to each panelist. So let us do a candid conversation. And through your responses to my question, you can introduce what you are doing. IHI, Mr. Seo, I'm going to ask you a question. IHI manufactures many different types of products. You have wealth of technology, but they must be very costly. And there would be a group of technology where decarbonization is difficult, but there could be immature technology, but high potential for future. So when you issue transition bond, how do you talk to the investors? How do you persuade them to invest? How do you advertise IHI's initiative towards net zero?
Thank you very much. My name is Seo. I'm from IHI. Thank you very much. And responding to your question, carbon, in order to achieve carbon neutrality, we have a transition plan in the form of a framework, sustainable finance framework, which we periodically update. And the framework is evaluated by a JCR as a third-party evaluation, and that is in line with the METI's framework. As a result, as Professor Shirai asked, what level of technological sureness is there? That is the question. So technological sureness or certainty, I think there are many reasons for pursuing it, but this is just like ordinary R&D, which forms a core part of the business strategy. So the technological sureness, the companies should use all possible knowledge and expertise. And the METI's roadmap, to begin with, the roadmap was created as a result of discussions with companies like ours. So the technology And our measures and the sureness, in our view, we would like to promote with the government. And we would like to persuade investors like the ones who are here today. And in order to do so, we first of all need to explain about our business strategy. One example is we are dealing with ammonia right now. And ammonia, there are, as you may be aware, there were many different opinions about ammonia, but things are now moving forward. And the reason is ammonia market must be created. So ammonia. So it is a fact that ammonia is quite effective for reducing GHG, and whether it will be viable as a technology to be used widely in the society, that has to be elucidated at the same time. So that is something necessary. And the technological background in my company, for example, firing or combustion technology, storage, and transport technology. So those things involve various things handled by a company like ours. And knowledge, the new knowledge and expertise will be fed back into the system. So in order to diversify risks, I mean, in the world of finance, the conglomerates may not be liked very much, but the companies with such a background and ability to hedge risks will be welcome. But not just that. In order to create a market, what kind of a value chain or supply chain need to be created? So in a broader sense, we need to think about this topic. And we are coming up with various ideas.
Thank you. Ammonia. Some people say it's risky, but I think we need to be flexible as we pursue decarbonization. If we do it the right way, we can expand the market and it will be available to the general population. So you're engaged in technological development. Thank you very much. JFE, Mr. Tetsuka. Steel industry is one of the hard-to-abate industries. CCS, hydrogen direct reduction technology is being tried out, but they are all very costly. So in the midst of such prohibitive cost, as you try to pursue net zero, how do you try to obtain the understanding of the investors? Thank you very much. Could we have the slides up? Next page. Thank you very much, Professor. I am Tezuka, in charge of climate change initiatives at JFE. On the right-hand side, we have the Japanese government's roadmap for the steel sector that they came up with when they came with the transition finance basic guidelines. And they conducted hearing of experts on listed the technology necessary. And based upon that roadmap of the government on the right, JFE came up with a 2050 carbon neutral diagram on the left. And how do we implement with what technology? That's the bottom left. So this is very much an overlay of METI's map. Then, more specifically, on what points will JFE Steel be focusing on? Sorry about the messy slide, but this is the diagram we came up with. It's not possible to choose just one technology. There's no technology to make steel in a carbon neutral manner. So we have to tap on various technology. To what extent do we include hydrogen in the electric furnace in order to reduce emission, or do we give up electric furnace and completely rely on hydrogen? Then what would that mean? And also, rather than reducing iron ore, what about recycling scrap? But there's much impurity in scrap, so high-grade steel is not possible. So by using scrap and electric arc furnace, to what extent can we purify the steel? So these are the three agendas, and in parallel, R&D activities are ongoing. And once it becomes ready to go, we implement those technologies. So it's a big financial challenge. In other words, colossal budget is necessary for R&D and processes, but at the same time, we have to also do capital expenditure to implement the ready-to-go technology. 2030, 30% reduction. Total 1 trillion yen will be required just for that 2030 goal. So there will be a huge demand. Going on to the next page. Based upon that context, this again is based upon METI's policy of transition finance, and they have chosen some model projects. We are engaged in one of them, and last June, for the first time as a manufacturing company, we issued 30 billion of transition bond in June last year. As indicated here, CO2 to reduce our emissions and in the short term, and energy manufacturing eco-friendly products like electric steel sheets or development of ultra-innovative steel making process. These are some of the technologies that we can use. So some of the proceeds will be used for R&D, and some of the proceeds will be used for these purposes. But this isn't enough, of course. 1 week ago, 250 billion yen of a public placement was done. So much of that is going to be electrical steel sheets for EV, because there's going to be explosive demand for these sheets. And providing that to the society, financing it, and also we need funds in our projects to reduce CO2 emissions. Our pathway is not a linear line. We can't go straight up to the summit of carbon neutrality. We don't have any jet engines available for the steel sector. We have to walk from the bottom of the mountain. But if we choose a safe path, we have to circumvent the steep hills, so it will be long. But if you want to go to the top in the short track, it will be a process that taps on technology by using something that would jumpstart us and get us to the top. So we do both. And that would require a huge amount of resources, but that's how we have commenced our efforts towards carbon neutrality. Thank you. METI's technology roadmap is the big basis, but each company will go through trials and errors as they make their own plans. Thank you very much. Next, Utsumi-san of Nippon Life. Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is a very important framework, and you are one of the main members. Financed emission. How do you reduce emissions? What kind of loan and investment criteria have you introduced for engagement?
My name is Utsumi from Nippon Life. Thank you for this opportunity. Page 2, please. Next one. First, I would like to talk about our ESG initiatives in asset management activities. Our company aims to realize a sustainable society based on investment and financing and dialogue. In the area of investment and financing, we have introduced ESG integration and negative screening. As for dialogue, we are promoting dialogue with approximately 70 companies, including the top greenhouse gas emitters. As part of our engagement activities, we are a member of the NZAOA, which requires member institutions to set interim targets toward achieving net zero emissions by 2050. We aim to achieve a total emissions of at least 45% below a 2010 level by 2030, and intensity of at least 49% below 2020 level by 2030. Through these activities, we are aiming to achieve a net zero in 2050. Regarding your question about the criteria for investment and loans, with the exception of projects subject to negative screening, we have not established clear criteria such as the European taxonomy, like we will invest in such and such projects, but not in such and such project, etc. We do not take a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather evaluate each project on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the circumstances of each industry and company, with a focus on whether the project is in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius target set in the Paris Agreement. Next page, please. We have established an ESG theme investment and loan facility with a target of accumulating 5 trillion yen by 2030. We have also established 3 trillion yen a decarbonization finance facility, which includes transition finance, and we intend to proceed with this facility with a firm target. We will also proactively disclose the positive impact on environment, or so-called outcomes, obtained through our thematic investments and loans. For example, if there is a GHG that was not emitted as a result of transition finance, we will disclose it. Next page, please. We believe that the environment for promoting a transition is very different in Asia, including Japan, compared to Europe and the United States. This figure here shows the amount of sunlight worldwide, and as you can see, the United States has abundant sunshine in general, and there is a lot of flat land for large-scale solar power generation facilities to be built, while many regions in Asia has much less sunlight. Next page, please. This is a chart showing wind conditions around the world. The wind conditions in Europe are strong and stable, making it suitable environment for onshore and offshore wind power generation, while in Asia, wind conditions are weak in many areas. Next page, please. The situation is generally the same in Asia, but the utilization rate of renewable energy facilities is low in Japan because Japan is an island country with limited land area and is surrounded by mountains, which impose many restrictions on solar power generation and onshore wind power generation. In this context, Japan's goal is to gradually improve existing facilities based on the energy mix. Technological innovations such as coal-fired power generation with ammonia co-firing or 100% ammonia firing are really unique to Japan. And as a financial institution, I would like to support such efforts.
Thank you very much. Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, you are one of the main members. There's environment unique to Japan and Asia, so rather than introducing one-size-fits-all standard along with Europe, there are Asia's idiosyncratic challenges. Thank you very much. Then Mr. Menard. Natixis is one of the top asset managers in Europe, and at the same time, Olivier, you are based in Singapore as well, so you watch Asia as well. So as you monitor Europe and at the same time look at Singapore and Asia, Japan included, what do you think about coal, thermal, and fossil fuel-based economies? How do you think, how are businesses trying to tackle decarbonization?
Thank you, Professor, for the question. You're right. I mean, few figures on because it's good to talk about coal. That's really the critical topic to be addressed in Asia Pacific. Why? 60% of power generation in the region is coal. A third of the emissions in APAC is related to coal. The International Energy Agency has called for a 55% reduction in coal-related emissions by 2030. At the same time, on the other side, there is another challenge. The energy demand in Asia Pacific is expected to increase by 2.5 times by 2050. So on one side, you have an issue with the production, and on the other side, you see the demand increasing significantly. So it's a main challenge. What has been done so far? I would think of 2 initiatives which have been launched recently and which are particularly interesting. We've been, as a bank, we've been answering those consultations. 2 consultations. One has been made by GFENS, Asia Pacific Network, looking at how to help financial institutions to identify and finance in an inclusive and just transition manner all those core assets which needs to be phased out. So the challenge is not on the shoulders of the asset owners and the operators. Finance and capital needs to be here to accompany this transition, to incentivize, even though most of the banks, most of the European banks at least, do not finance coal anymore. So there is a kind of a gap here. But if we find a right way to allow banks collectively to create an alliance, allowing carbon credits to be inputted in the system for banks to retire earlier those assets and make sure that if the operational lifetime is 2035 for an asset, but it is being bought back by certain investors committing to switch it off in 2030, then we'll be successful. So it's an extremely difficult piece of work that needs to be designed by all parties, regulators, central banks, industrial companies, banks, development banks, commercial banks, investment banks, to achieve that. There are some pilots ongoing, and hopefully those pilots can be industrialized. The other one is MAS, so GFENS, and MAS, so the monetary authorities of Singapore, which are trying to embed criteria into the taxonomy of Singapore to best accompany those assets to be retired. So on those 2 consultations, I mean, there are things which are being done at the right level for institutions, financial institutions, and economic players to achieve that goal, which is a real challenge.
Thank you. European financial institutions no longer are financing coal-based power generation plants, but in Asia, it's the highest growing region. There's a huge appetite for energy, and emission is the highest in region, so there are Asia unique challenges. And Olivier, as you said, we have to find the right way. But if we do it cleverly, we will be able to support the transition. I think that's what you said. Next, Kajiwara-san of JCR. JCR is playing a very important role. Transition bond issuance. You offer second opinion in order to elevate credibility. So that is a very important role. ICMA, ICB, certification bodies are becoming ever more stringent, like inclusion of scope 3 or link to net zero. So their criteria is becoming ever more stringent. So based upon such trend, what about JCR in terms of transition finance? Thank you very much. Again, I am Kajiwara of JCR. Could we have the slides? If we could go to page 2. As was introduced, On sustainable finance in general, we watch global standards and domestic roadmaps and guidelines, and we look at the consistency so that comparability can be offered to investors so that they can make investment decisions. We are such a company. Next page. Again, you know this well, but climate transition finance, how did it all start? In China and Japan, we are issuing transition bonds. So people may think that this is an Asia-specific financial instrument, but it was ICMA's handbook that began to talk about this, and this was issued in December 2020, published in December 2020. And METI, JFSA, and Ministry of Environment came up with the basic guidelines on climate transition finance. As Mr. Tezuka said, they are advocating the pursuit of various multiple parallel pathways. So how do we do our evaluation based upon those global and Japanese trends? Climate transition finance. If the purpose is identified, it could be part of green finance. And also, without an identified purpose, if it's only reduction target, then we call it sustainability-linked bonds. And we come up with a third-party opinion based upon that criteria. So amongst international criteria, transition is taken into consideration. So transition finance is a very important part of sustainable finance. Then, when we look at asset, what's our reference? What do we refer to? IHI, JFE has already touched upon this, but METI has come up with the sector-based roadmap, which is quite unique because there aren't so many other governments that have been able to do so. What is this like? In these sectors that are listed here, by 2030 or by 2050 or even by 2025, what kind of technology will be made available or ready? And by presenting such expectation, the transition strategy for Japan that is highly dependent on the manufacturing sector can be communicated to the whole world. By 2050, what is the pathway to be pursued? As you have all talked about, there has to be disruptive innovation, discontinuous innovation. CBI, an international NGO, has come up with the right-hand side diagram. Some may be able to do with just clean energy, but you have to really work hard if we were to attain below 1.5 degree. And what is a credible transition finance in order to enable us to do this? First and foremost, science-based. It has to be Paris consistent. And towards such Paris consistent science-based goal, what technology would become ready? Next generation technology will eventually become ready. So there has to be a social system that would smooth out the supply chain. Some companies will have to spend much on transition costs, so there has to be fair competition conditions. And in the pathway for transition, as Nippon Life already mentioned, there are sector by sector or district by district differences. So flexibility has to be presented. Financial institutions must reconstruct the financial mechanism taking into consideration ICP. So the public sector, private sector, finance sector, corporate sector will all have to get together and in solidarity pursue this pathway towards transition. Thank you very much. JCR is using ICMA principles as the basis, and you also use the METI's sector-based technology roadmap to come up with the evaluation. So I think we have gone really far in terms of transition finance. We have some time left, so again, I would like to ask you some questions. First of all, IHI, Mr. Seo and Mr. Tezuka of JFE. GX transition bond, 10 years, 20 trillion yen, and 2 trillion yen in year 1. That includes green. Many different things are included, but what about your companies? What's the technology you want to develop? So what's the area where you want government support? Please. Thank you. At IHI, as I said, hydrogen, ammonia included, Japan's or Asia's energy security related technology is our focus. It's important for energy security and social infrastructure. And when it comes to regulation regarding transition bonds, that's important. But on top of that, as I said, there has to be the formation of a market. In the GX strategy, there has to be a global strategy that also covers market development. So there has to be individual technological progress, but at the same time, we hope that the government can inject efforts to develop a market. Thank you very much. Same answer, but in fact, of course, enormous technological development and process development is being done. So there's not enough money. We want grants for those developments, but green market creation is one area where there has not been much investment. If we want green steel or low emission steel, the functionality of the steel may be sacrificed. We don't want to sacrifice functionality, and if we don't want to create something green, the cost becomes higher. So we have to have a market or a huge amount of customers that would be willing to pay the premium for such steel, or else even if we issue bonds, we will not be able to circulate those funds back into the market. So we hope that the proceeds from the green bond of METI can be used for market development or fostering customers that would be very happy to purchase green products around the world. So those are some of the initiatives that has to be done, or else we will enter into a deadlock.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Utsumi and Mr. Menard. And as we heard, in Asia, lots of coals is used. And in one voice, we would like to work collectively. That, I think, is important. However, whenever we say coal, always it gets negative opinions from the overseas parties. And in order to avoid giving an impression that we are maintaining status quo, are there any measures? If I may go first. As I showed you previously, what is important is to ask them to understand the situation of each region, so just a transition. There is no one-fits-all type of approach that can be applied to all regions. So the gradual phasing out, or the developed nations helping such phase out, such rulemaking unique to Asia would be necessary. And first of all, we need to put together our best practices in Japan and disseminate the information to the external community. Mr. Menard.
Yes. I think we all have the same objective. So the idea is to steer capital to allow sustainable finance to accompany this transition. Is the transition different in Asia versus Europe or the rest of the world? The baseline is different, but transition should be the same. The baseline is different, so the trajectory will not start from the same point. But at the end of the day, we all have the same goal. So we need to collectively agree on that. Trajectory and targets, interim targets, needs to be set to best design the overall trajectory to net zero in 2050. And this is what we are doing every day with our clients in Japan, in Indonesia, in China, where this issue is a major issue.
ありがとうございます。最後に梶原さん。
Thank you. Lastly, Kajiwara-san. When we talk about transition bond, as you said, Japan and China are doing that. But Japanese companies, can they issue that in other countries? Or what about companies around the world issuing those bonds in Japan? First of all, green and transition are not separated, are not isolated. So that's one point that I wish to correct. So all of those measures included, the whole society has to achieve less than 1.50. So for Japanese companies to be better known to global investors, of course they need technology, but with that technology, how much GHG emission can be reduced? That may be more of a focus than renewable energy. And if one company can't show that to the investors, maybe we can show the nationwide possible potential emissions reduction. And with the flexibility, I think both sides should come closer. Thank you very much. Then, lastly, to each one of you, you have prepared panels, so could we ask you to do that from Kajiwara-san? We were told to write one word on the panel. To all the people in the next generation, transition exists. It's similar to what I've already said, but it's not that people who use renewable energy is the only clean people, that coal is bad. Both the demand side and consumption side are working hard towards transition, and finance has to support both sides. And it's not just large caps. If we are to talk about scope 3, then the more vulnerable SMEs in the supply chain also emit GHG, so we have to support them as well. Thank you very much. And Mr. Menard?
Sorry, I did not write one word, but two, almost three. Access to liquidity. Why access to liquidity? It may sound weird here in a discussion about transition. Not entirely. What the market is trying to do, what regulators are trying to do, is all about this. How to make sure capital is being given a preferential rate to the one transitioning. And this is what we all see from a regulatory standpoint, all those ESG acronyms that we all see, which is forcing corporates, investors, banks to disclose more, to be more transparent. All this is being done with one purpose, to see the one which are at the forefront versus the one which are lagging behind. You have ECB. ECB has recently put in place a mechanism on its bond holding portfolio. To greenify its bond holding portfolio, they are now reinvesting the bonds which are maturing towards more green, and the assets or the issuers which are more brown are giving some constraints in terms of tenor. All is done at the regulatory level and within central banks to shift the capital. And this is as well what we do as a bank today, Natixis CIB. We have our own tool measuring the climate impact of each and every financing that we provide to our clients, because we believe at some point the regulator will impose to the system a mechanism which will allow us to put less capital in front of a transition or a green story versus a brown asset or a brown company which has not taken any actions in fighting climate change.
はい、臼見さんどうぞ。
はい、
So I would say dialogue times dialogues times dialogues. So 3 kinds of dialogues. The road to decarbonization in Japan will not be easy and rather will be challenging. And I believe that the key word here will be dialogue. One is the dialogue between companies and investors, and the dialogues between Japan and the international community, and the dialogue between the government and the private sector. In other words, engagement. Engagement also means a commitment between 2 people to marry. And I believe that what is needed in Japan today is not mere discussion, but we need to more closely work together with stakeholders. Thank you, Tezuka-san. So as I said in my presentation, in case of steel making, we must continue very long-term activities in order to achieve carbon neutrality, and therefore not in the span of 2 or 3 years, but a decade or 2, and sustainable transition of finance or transition support, rather. So I would like every stakeholder to support this, not just in terms of a fund or financing, but the market. We would like people to more highly evaluate steels created by a greener process, and ammonia and hydrogen. A huge amount of hydrogen and ammonia will be necessary in order to create such steels. Even if our technology is completed, unless we have enough ammonia and hydrogen, we cannot run factories. So all those parts are necessary for this scenario. That is my message.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. My title was written as manager of HRD, but I'm in charge of ESG. That is why I'm on the panel, but my words are related to what people have presented. There's no one single element that will solve everything. Network, there are global challenges. There's the issue of SMEs. Support is required. So network is crucial. And as Mr. Tezuka mentioned, this will require a very long timeline. We're aware of that. We understand that. But at the same time, extremely high speed, ultra high speed will be required. But in terms of speed, for example, in the case of ammonia, until some time ago, there was much rejection. Suddenly, we feel this tailwind. But then we once again wake up in the morning and find out that Japan is slightly behind others. And same applies to green transformation. So speed is crucial. So a society that enables this to be achieved, I think that's what we should be aiming to build. Thank you very much. Finally, if I may present to you my words. Dialogue is important, and information delivery is important. With Asian Development Bank and Asian regulatory authorities, I am discussing these issues, including measurement of Scope 3. This is only on informal basis. I think it's time is ready to do dialogue on those matters. I have to go to the website of each regulatory authority. There's no standardization. So with ADB, we are trying to establish a platform in the Asian Development Bank. So finally, in Asia, all the stakeholders are coming together to do this dialogue, and taking into consideration the uniqueness of Asia, we're trying to pursue decarbonization. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, we will have to close. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much. Could we thank the panelists with a round of applause?
Members of the panel, moderator, thank you so much.